300 people, 300 rectangles. That's going to take a while to go through.
Okay, it's getting.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Many people in.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hey.
I had no idea you can have so many people in Zoom meetings.
Hello.
This is how we begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to
Hi.
UX Salon. Stop sharing. We're going to let some people in a little bit before we start. Let people piling in.
Avi, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm excited.
Are you? Well, you look excited.
Over 1,000 people signed up for this. So there's a lot of viewing eyes right now. It's a bit crazy.
So everybody's looking at you and your wonderful typefaces poster in the back.
Yes.
Why don't you share the story about your type poster while everybody else is watching and listening?
This is the elements of typography. This is the best, supposed to be the best fonts, the most used fonts in the last 10 years or something. So I like to be smart like that. And also, check this out.
Oh, you're doing all this snap filter thing. This is how, isn't it like people think that people do in like 2020?
Oh, yes. Exactly.
Well, it seems like it was a long time ago now. I don't know. It's like we're living in the future. Don't forget that.
So I'm just checking in that all systems are go. And here we go. We're on live on YouTube as well. And yes. Okay, so I'm going to just wait a few more minutes until everyone comes in. I'm seeing Leah Netta in my chat. Hi, Leah.
Hi. How
Where
are you?
from?
I'm from Israel.
Oh, from Israel. Good. It seems like you have a nice kitchen over there in the back.
It's a fake background, but thanks.
Yes. So what do you do?
Head of creative at a high-tech company.
Oh, high-tech company.
Yeah.
That's good. I know that high-tech company.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know what it is. No.
Yeah,
But it's good to meet you. Nice to meet you here. There's a lot of people from around the world. Over 1,000 people signed up for this. I'm waiting a little bit for people to come in and kind of wasting some time. You know what? Let's see. Anyone else wants to chat?
Is there going to be a recording on YouTube? You said this.
This is going to YouTube right now as well.
Okay, so what's your YouTube channel?
It's UX Salon, but it's not listed. You got to go to the Eventbrite.
Okay.
Go to the Eventbrite page for this event, and you'll be able to see a YouTube box there as well.
I'll also drop it in the chat just now if anyone wants to go there.
Okay, but the chat is here, so stay here if you're already here. Like we want to interact with you, engage with you here. Okay, who is here from North America? Say hello. Anyone?
Hi.
Oh,
Hello.
BK, Bangladesh.
Hello.
Thomas.
At Kansas.
This is Greta from Brooklyn.
Hey, Greta, Brooklyn. Wow, amazing. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, hi, everyone from North America.
Someone.
Say hello. Anyone?
Yeah, if you say hello, mute yourself back so we hear you.
Hi, this is Hirsch from Detroit.
Detroit. Wow, great.
Hey, folks. Andy from Boston, Massachusetts.
Cool. Who else?
From Texas. Now from India.
India. Wow. What time is it there?
It's 10:05 p.m.
At night. Yes. Cool.
Hey, this is Colin from the Philadelphia area in the USA.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Colin. Nice to see you, Colin.
Here's Rahul from Toronto.
Hey, Toronto. Cool. I know Toronto well. Okay.
This is Houston, Texas.
Houston. Nice to see you. Okay, we'll get back to you. We'll meet more people in soon. I'll start my presentation. There's already 500 people here. So let's start this thing. Where are we? Okay. So share screen. Ooh, so hello everyone and welcome to UX Salon. UX Night. Here in Tel Aviv it is already night, but in North America it is morning. So I guess good morning, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Nice to all see you here. Okay, so soon we're going to meet with Jon. But in the meantime, if you, there is some cruding on the presentation, right? Do you see some lines? So people see lines on the.
Yeah. We see
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, artifacts.
Yes, here
Why is
also.
that?
Line.
You can minimize those Zoom screens. Yep.
Minimize. Okay. Let's see if I do this
Working
again.
now.
Okay,
Oh.
now it works.
You're good.
Okay.
That's it.
So say hello in the chat, please. Write your name and say where you're from. Introduce yourself in the chat. This is what the chat is for. Please, you know, I want to get to know you all. I want to see where everyone is coming from. So it would be nice. Use the chat to put your city and country name. Also change your name. Put your country or your city in your name so we know where you're from as well. That would be nice. This is how you do it. Oh, there's a cruding here. Okay, this is weird, this thing. That you cannot see. Okay.
That usually happens, Avi, when you have some sort of a Zoom floating window or so on top of your slides.
So I should minimize it.
Yep.
Okay, let's see if that works. Okay. That's a good tip.
There's also a feature where that they launched where you can play the presentation full screen in a window, so it avoids all that conflict that gets faced typically.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to start the first 30 minutes of this. We're going to have introduction. We're going to play little games. We're going to meet Vitaly soon. Also, Laws of UX will start exactly at 7 my time, which means in the half an hour mark. Maybe earlier if we manage to go through everything. We're going to have a salon discussion afterwards. Stick around for that. I'll tell you about it in a minute. And after that, we're going to have networking. We're going to actually, and I'm going to tell you about this soon. So right now, I'd like to do something I've seen somewhere else. Since we're here to celebrate UX, if I can ask all of you that are on camera to help me out and to do this thing, to do UX. And that's going to be cool to see everyone, all the wall of people doing this. So let's do this together. UX. UX. Yes. Okay. This is very cool. Okay. So before we begin, I want to talk to you a little bit about this idea of like going online versus offline. You know, before this age of online meetings and Corona and all that stuff, we used to meet offline. You know, we went out of the house. We took, you know, we dressed nicely. We went out and we parked our car. We went in and we sat and we watched the presentation politely. And then at the end of the presentation, there was a question and answers. And this is how we kind of engaged and learned with each other. And of course, there was a networking session. And we're going to talk about it in a minute. But I find that creating these online events, it's something else happening and it's actually even more exciting because during the talk, I noticed people are actually talking and interacting and chatting. And this creates the magic of this live event where we can all interact and talk to each other and engage. If someone has a question, please answer. And if you have a comment, please put it in the chat. So I think this is a great, you know, but also when we are online, there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of, you know, the phone is beside us and there's people around us. So when we go out to an event, there's no distraction. So what I would ask you, if you're here, you know, turn off your phones, you know, close the door behind you, focus on this because it's a, you know, it's a rare moment where we can actually share and learn and be together. So do that. Now, so use the chat throughout the presentation. At the end, we're going to come back and we're going to have a salon discussion. We're going to involve some of you guys on camera asking questions. Also, there's a new feature on Zoom that you can raise your hand. Well, that was not a new feature, but you can add some markings on your, if you like something, put a heart on it. If you give it a thumbs up and so forth. And if you have a question at the end of the salon, raise your hand. This is how you do it in the reactions tab. So also, what else is happening in an online event? We have a collaborative Google Doc where you can actually write notes. Everyone is writing notes. Why not do it together? So basically, there's a link in the chat. Toby is going to paste the link in the chat. Basically, how you do it is you go in, put your name, and take your notes. That's it. And then everyone can see, because everyone is learning something else. Everyone has a different perspective on learning. Why not share this wealth of information and knowledge? It's a great idea. Also, are you looking for a job? If you are, and we want to get to know you, because there's a lot of people here, scroll down at the bottom of that page, or if you're hiring, list your wanted ads, what city it is, because it's from around the world, or put in your portfolio or LinkedIn and say, I am a senior this and that, I'm a junior this and that, and I'm looking for this, okay? And perhaps somehow we can create this magic of connecting people and finding them their next position, their next career. I am actually looking for a senior UX architect based in Israel. If you have experience in 2 years of designing complex systems, and you have experience in cyber or big data or analysis systems, please get in touch with me after. It would be great. I can connect you to a company, a really, really interesting, exciting project here in Herzliya. So that's, yeah. Question? Okay. So basically, the email for that is info@uxsalon.com, or my name is Avi Itzkovich. It's not hard to find me. Networking. Everyone looking at this photo, you remember how it was when we went into an event and all of a sudden you see these people in front of you and there's a group of people there and you go over and you introduce yourself and you say, hey, how are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? What's your name? And this is how we created the networks and got advanced. But this is so missing from these online events. So what we're going to do at the end, after everything is said and done, after the salon talk, after the presentation, if anyone wants to stay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide us into small groups like you would have in a real event. It will be random. And perhaps for 10, 15 minutes, we can go in and kind of introduce ourselves. Or if there's enough people, we can just stay here in one big room and kind of talk. I'd love to do that. I've done that in the past. It's always interesting to meet people from around the world and kind of network. And connections are made like this. So we're going to do that at the end of the presentation and talk. And here, this is the head of Vitaly Friedman. Anyone knows Vitaly Friedman? Vitaly, are you here?
Of course I am, Avi.
Hey.
I'm just listening to you and to your smooth and very kind of gentle voice, I think. It's such a pleasure to be here, to be back. Thanks for inviting me.
Vitaly, it's so good to see you as well. I think last time we met was in Lithuania.
I think it was many years. Well, it seems like a centuries ago now. And I think we're very similar, aren't we? We're like brothers from the other planet or so.
Yes,
seems like that.
Yes, indeed.
It's
and
like,
there's a lot of people from Lithuania here.
Oh,
as well.
hello.
I want to say hello, shout out to all the Lithuanians. Vitaly,
yes,
I know
sir.
you like cats.
Not really.
No?
Frankly, I'm allergic to cats, but that's a very long conversation Anybody likes cats here? Please write cats in the chat. I'm just going to hijack the chat right here. And if you're more kind of a dog person, please write dogs. It seems like
that's a good one.
Oh,
so
there's a fight going on.
If there's a misbehaving cat, the word is shkots, and then the cat relaxes.
Well, as long as the cat is relaxing or relaxes, that's probably.
To Lithuanian cat, he's going to relax.
Well, I heard that they behave properly when they're supposed to, so. Although that's not usual for cats. Oh, this has been such a year. It's unbelievable. I mean, for dear friends who are joining here and wondering who the hell is that?
Yes, who are you? That's like
that's a very good question. I wish I could have an answer to that question. Well, essentially, I'm one of the co-founders of Smash Magazine, an online magazine for designers and developers. We did publish a lot of stuff over the last 15 years. It's like 3,500 articles. And today there is 3,500 first. Which was published as well, and on front end and UX and all. But most of my time, recent years, actually was spent in companies where I was doing a lot of consultancy work for UX and for design, companies like European Parliament and others. That was kind of funny because then you actually learn a lot about the...
People, mute yourself.
Yes,
Someone
because
is not muted.
in those companies you kind of learn quite a bit, right? And so I'm just having the privilege to, be invited and or just attend really cool meetups on UX, and happen to be joining this one apparently.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's some noise in the background. You still here?
Yes, yeah. What I was actually wanted to say though is very different, because you mentioned the difference between online and offline, and it's kind of really interesting because in the beginning when all of this happened, I don't know how you feel about this or felt about this, but in the beginning when it all started, I felt like very much lost because everything is ruined. My routine that I got used to, like traveling and all that, was gone. But I really learned to love online, and I learned to love online, not online conferences necessarily, but online meetups and online workshops. And if I had an opportunity, I probably would prefer the online one compared to the in-person one. But that's just me, maybe. There's a lot of value online.
Really?
Yeah.
But
I think
why?
so. There are so many things. So we've been running a couple of workshops on our own, and I heard that I'll have a privilege to be running one with you in February as well.
Let's talk about it in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing that was really remarkable for me to see is that you have such a liberation, such a freedom when you're running things online. When we're running workshops, there were so very strange things happening. Like one at a time, there was this guy who was essentially running during the workshop. So this would be a workshop that would last like 3 hours or so. So he would go to the park and he would run for the first part of it, which would be the lecture. And then he would be coming back, taking a shower, eating something, sitting down and getting ready for the practical part. How can you do that in a seating space where you are stuck with like 40 or 50 other people? Impossible. On the other hand, you have the situations where somebody, because people turn on the camera and they sometimes forget that, and so they go and cook while listening to you. This is so intimate. This is unbelievable. I mean, I really like this notion of distorted, noisy pixels, which are so authentic. It's just kind of more authentic than real life is sometimes.
I don't know if I agree with you.
And I really think that we romanticize this idea of don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-human in any way, and I kind of like people, don't get me wrong. But I think there is this idea that we think that we go to the kitchen and then we meet other people and then other people bring ideas and then we build our ideas on top of their ideas. I really don't believe that. I think that most of the time, at least in my experience, when I meet other people at the kitchen, and sometimes it's more like an interruption than anything else, right? But of course, you can get great ideas from talking to people, but you can do that online as well. But for online workshops, I fell absolutely in love with them. I would probably never be able to go back.
Someone is screen sharing. People don't do that. I don't even know how to stop that.
You see, this is the thing that you will never get in an in-person conference or so. Like everybody has the freedom to do whatever they want. Isn't it the ultimate like liberty in here? And everybody is just the same. Like everybody is just a distorted rectangle with the kind of broken pixels. I love that. Is anybody with me at this point?
Anyone?
Or do you feel like
that's a very fun perspective for sure, Vitaly? That's very fun to hear.
Well,
I agree. There is a different kind of intimacy because you see people in their own environment doing their own sort of. So you're in their home, so there's a different level of intimacy, as opposed to on a face-to-face meeting. That's a different intimacy versus online. You're in their space.
Right.
You get to know them as a personality, a little bit about them.
I totally agree with you, Colin. And I think like the truth is somewhere in between, I'm sure. But for me personally, I mean, the situation that brought us to online world where meetings like this are becoming normal, I mean, whether we want it or not, and they probably will stay normal over time as this thing fades away, right? I kind of like this idea of being forced in this new environment and finding my way into getting comfortable, I guess, with how things are and being able to get access to people I would never be able to achieve otherwise, right? If you have an in-person conference or in-person meetup or so in Tel Aviv, right, you are stuck. You can, of course, broadcast it, right? But we didn't really have this culture of online meetups, really, to that degree as we have now. And so I find it remarkable that they can actually reach people from Hong Kong while also being able to reach people from South Africa and the US at the same time. That's, for me, it's a miracle.
And it's free. And it's free.
Yes, and it's free.
Okay.
Well, that's not so great for some conference organizers, I would argue, but yeah. You're right.
Vitaly, I want to bring it back to some UX stuff. We're going to have a workshop next month about the navigation of all things.
Oh, right.
Why,
I've totally forgotten.
Tell me a little bit, why navigation all of a sudden? I mean, everyone knows navigation, right? What's happening?
Yeah, so I've been spending a lot. I mean, I had a bit of time last year, like a little bit more time because I just canceled all traveling and I just traveled quite a bit. And so I had a lot of time to look into case studies and work with companies and also trying to kind of solve some issues that were kind of dominant. And one of the common issues that showed up, and this is the issue that I didn't spend enough time maybe in the previous years, is the issue of complex navigation. So when it comes to things like mega dropdowns, really complicated mega dropdowns with 3-4 nested levels, or when it comes to something like an e-commerce site with tons of filters and sorting and search and everything in between, when it comes to onboarding, all of this kind of requires some sort of navigation. And it doesn't matter if it's like a big scale project or a small one. And so I think in many ways, we're used to those patterns that are utterly counterproductive. One of them being a hamburger menu, for example. If you think about this notion of the hamburger menu, it's actually a very strange pattern to use, and yet still we just adopt it without even thinking about it twice. But if you look into data, if you look into research, you'll find out that hiding things in a hamburger menu is probably the worst thing you can do for your e-commerce site. You need to expose and highlight critical items instead of hiding them. And so there are many of those things which also can be related to filters and sorting. How do you get it right? Right? Especially when you have a very complex system, like an e-commerce retail system or this kind of thing, like think Nike.com, right? How would you make a really decent, beautiful, nice, well-used navigation there? That's not trivial at all. And so what I actually wanted to do in February with you and kind of people who are going to join the workshop is to spend 3 days, but not full days, kind of 3 times 2.5 hours, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be, if you like or do not like Valentine's Day. This is just afterwards. It's 15th, 16th to 17th of February, where we can dive into some of those issues that are everywhere. And the best part is everybody can bring in their own navigation problem of their own existing site or application or anything, and we're going to try to fix it on spot. And we are going to do it in a really lovely online workshop environment in Miro. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Miro, like a collaborative space where we'll all be designing together live. And this is going to be great because it's online, cool. Avi, because it's online.
I've seen that. That's really cool where everyone comes together. And it's going to be, like I said, 2.5 hours for 3 days, short, but concise and to the point. Thank you, Vitaly. I'm really glad that you joined and you're joining us to this presentation.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to February, right? And yes. I'm not trying to be salesman. I'm a really bad salesman. I really promise. I really am. But Avi, it might be a good idea to plug in a link to that workshop just in case if somebody is
Toby, please put in the link. Also, by the way, so I have a surprise for you, Vitaly. Let's see here. I will share the screen again.
Toby is the best, by the way.
Just Toby, place that link there for the thing. Okay, so we have this. And
that's me.
So we have a special discount. If you write I love UX 20 for the next 48 hours, you can get that discount on the website. So anyone here joining us on Zoom, if you put in I love UX 20, you get for the next 48 hours. So that's that. Also, people,
it should have been. Oh, sorry to hijack you.
Yes,
it should have been the Salon like I love 21. That would have been nice. 21% discount. That I would love that. Maybe that will be a hidden one.
We'll think about it for next time.
Yeah, but thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome, and see you soon.
I'm staying. No worries.
Oh, okay, cool. So anyone following UX Salon on Instagram, please do that. Please pull out your phone and look for UX Salon.
We all get a follow back.
It's turned off. The phone is turned off.
Please do that because you get updates on upcoming events. Sometimes I share free tickets to events that are we do raffles. You get UX inspiration, and also I'd love to see how it looks from your end. How are you looking at us? Last time someone was watching with his cat. This is the view. So if you are watching it, please tag UX Salon. Take a photo of your screen or whatever, your living room, whatever, how you see it, and share with us. And I'll share and reshare it on UX Salon and make you famous back. So that would be really, really great to see how you sing it. And of course, would be great to see you follow UX Salon. So also, by the way, Vitaly, do you know that I'm doing UX wear? There's like a line of t-shirts you can buy. If you love UX design, there's all these t-shirts on the website. Yes, so if you go to uxsalon.com/uxwear, why go to work naked, right? Wear something that represents what you do.
That's reasonable, Avi. Yeah, I think.
Right?
Yes.
That's cool.
Well, I had no idea, so I'm going to
I
watch out for
had
this.
some free time, and I think it's really great. And I actually ordered some, and they really feel good. So
I would love to get some socks if I can.
Socks. Oh, this is the next startup. Okay. So if you have an interesting talk, people, if you have an interesting talk, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you for the next events. Okay, so now I'd love to introduce Jon Yablonski. Is this how you say it?
You nailed it.
Yes, cool. Jon is the author of the book Laws of UX, and we're going to watch his presentation in a few seconds. If you want to have a copy of the book for the next 30 days, Toby, please paste in the link for the O'Reilly's online learning. You sign up for that, and you get 30 days of the book with other books as well. But there's a special link, and thank you, Jon, for this. Also, Jon offers 20% off on the posters for Laws of UX. So if you like that, just put in UX Salon. There's a code, and you get 20% if you want to order the posters, so you can remember today's presentation forever on your wall. So that's it, Jon. I think it's time. The floor is yours.
Excellent.
So I will have you share your screen.
All right.
Cool. So go for it.
You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, we do.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm absolutely flattered. You'd want to spend your evening or afternoon or morning if you're in North America with me. So let's get started. Today, I want to talk about how designers can use psychology to design better products and services. Let's see here. All right, so first, a little bit about me, though. I'm a multidisciplinary designer, speaker, writer, and digital creator. I'm based right outside of Detroit, Michigan. And currently, my focus is on building the next generation of in-vehicle interactive experiences as a senior product designer at GM. So as a designer, this is the kind of thing I'm really interested in. Not necessarily medians or landscaping even, but the paths that people take through the landscape. And, as a UX designer, obviously I'm very specifically interested in the digital landscape and how people kind of navigate the digital space and interact with things. And I really think that, as a designer, understanding the kind of core mental blueprint that we all share as human beings is a core part of doing this, right? It helps us as designers kind of build technology, products, and services around the way people actually think, instead of, really requiring them to bend to the technology, and really building more human-centered, intuitive experiences as a result of considering that mental blueprint that we share as humans. And this kind of, interest has really driven me to explore a lot of different things. Most significantly, a project called Laws of UX, which was a website I launched about 2 years ago today, actually, that really helped me as a designer kind of create the resource that I was looking for. I was looking for, something that was visually engaging, and then also made it very clear where that intersection of psychology and UX design was, and what was important to understand about it. And what I was finding back in 2018, 2017 was, a lot of academic research papers that were hard to really decipher, or marketing articles that didn't go quite deep enough. So I decided to create this project and really use it as a platform to explore and document what I was learning at the time. By the way, if you've been following Laws of UX, the website, I'm getting ready to launch a new version of it. It's more of a revamp, if you will, that'll be coming out soon. So keep an eye out for that. But what I'm here to really kind of go into today is the book, Laws of UX, Using Psychology to Design Better Products and Services, which was published by O'Reilly back in April of 2020. And I'm very proud of this book. It gave me an opportunity to dive a lot deeper than had what I detailed on the website, really kind of explore, the things that I think are important for designers to understand about these heuristics that are detailed on the website. And that's, who were the psychologists that originated the thinking? What were the studies that were relevant to the evolution of that heuristic? And really use the book as a way to really deconstruct familiar apps and websites that we're, already kind of familiar with, and do that in the context of these heuristics to really drive home how they intersect with, how psychology intersects with design. Because, if you came from a background that didn't originate in psychology, you might not have that kind of foundational knowledge as a designer that I think is really beneficial. So I really wanted to make these heuristics a lot more accessible to people and really provide a very practical way to make the connection between psychology and design. And this book was a platform to really dive into that. This is a quick overview of the chapters. I don't talk about everything in the book that's from the website. I hone in on some of the heuristics I think are the most relevant. In my career as a designer, there are definitely things that occur or surface up more often than not. And this book was really to hone in and go into detail on those specific ones that constitute 80% of the work that we do as designers. So I honed in on those. And then of course, you can't talk about the intersection of psychology and design and not really talk about the ethical implications of using psychology in design. So I spent a chapter really diving into that, as well as kind of a practical framework for applying these principles, really how to operationalize them within your design practice or your team, if you will. So in this talk, we're not going to have an opportunity to go through all of these, but I want to kind of hone in on some of my absolute favorites from here. And, starting with Jacob's Law, and then we'll end with kind of taking a look at some of the ethical implications of these principles, and then finally how to operationalize those and use those in your design work. So starting off with Jacob's Law, which states that users spend most of their time on other sites. This means that users prefer your site to work the same as all the other sites they know. And this was coined by Jacob Nielsen in 2000. And Jacob was really referring to websites at the time, right? But I think it's easy to kind of expand on this idea and see how it applies to really any digital experience. And that's because the underlying psychology concept related to Jacob's Law is a mental model, which is basically what we think we know about a system, especially about how it works. It's how we use the knowledge we already have from past experiences when interacting with something new. So what does this mean? That means that people are going to bring baggage with them. They're going to bring an understanding with them every time they engage with something that you've created, a product, a service, a VR experience. They're going to bring what they understand or similar experiences that they have into that to kind of inform what they think they should be doing, how they should be interacting with the service or app. And the implications to this are many, right? I love using this example to kind of make the correlation between mental models and the physical space, because if you look at the left, this is a NASA control board. And, I just love control boards like this because they always feature like Futura all over it. And there's these beautiful kind of switches and toggles. But if you look at those closely and you look at the digital equivalents to the right, you can see that the designers of early web controls really were, taking a direct kind of inspiration from the physical equivalents on these control panels. Things like switches and toggles and radio buttons really have a direct correlation to their physical counterparts. And you can say that the designers of these early web controls are really building upon the mental model that people already had of how these kind of controls work, right? They were building upon that and translating them into the digital space so that people would understand kind of intuitively how to interact with them. Another example I point out in the book is this seat controls panel that's from, I believe, a Mercedes vehicle. And this is really interesting in that, you know, the designers of this vehicle could have very easily have just put these seat controls in a horizontal row and, you know, called it a day. What they did instead, though, was build upon people's pre-existing mental model of what a seat looks like, the shape of a seat. And then they formed the buttons to manipulate the seat in the shape of that seat. So people kind of intuitively know which button to interact with to manipulate which part of the seat. This is a great example of building upon a mental model that already existed in order to create a more intuitive experience for the occupants of this vehicle, especially when they want to, you know, manipulate their seat. And then, you know, another example I'll point out in the book that is ubiquitous, it's all over the place, and we're probably all too familiar with this with COVID-19 is online shopping. And I think, you know, e-commerce websites are very interesting in that they all follow very similar conventions, very similar patterns as far as design goes. So product tiles that feature prominently the pricing and description of the product, you know, the kind of grid of product even, and then of course the shopping cart icon in the top right corner where you can typically find these. And even the concept of a shopping cart icon itself is a direct carryover from, you know, the physical counterpart from grocery stores where you would go around and put products in your shopping basket, right? So it's very interesting to see how, you know, not only are we borrowing from the physical counterpart of like a shopping cart, but then also, you know, the conventions that these e-commerce websites use are very ubiquitous. They're very similar. And that's because the last thing you want people to do when they come to your e-commerce website is figure out how to use the website, right? You want them instead to focus in on buying product, which is why they came there to begin with. And following very familiar patterns and conventions allows them to do just that. It removes all the friction that would be there if they had to kind of relearn how to use a website. And instead, they just kind of instinctively know how it works because they visited other e-commerce websites. When we talk about mental models, there's also a concept known as mental model discordance. And this is when the mental model that exists doesn't quite match up with this, you know, new mental model that they're having to form. And in the digital space, there's where you see this kind of rise more often than not is with like redesigns. I think one company that's always been really great about redesigning their products and services has been Google, and, you know, by extension, YouTube. Because when they launch a new product, say for example, when YouTube did a redesign back in a couple of years ago, they gave people the opportunity to opt out and go back to the older experience for a certain amount of time. And what they did in doing this is allowed people to kind of build upon the mental model they had and become familiar with the new experience without having to be locked into that new experience, right? So that it's mitigating the mental model discordance that would have happened had YouTube just flipped the switch with a redesign and instead let people kind of get a little bit more familiar with it over time. Now, there's also examples, of course, in the digital space where companies haven't done this. One that comes to mind, maybe the most notorious, is Snapchat. When they did a big redesign a couple years back and they flipped the switch and on an entirely different experience than what people were familiar with beforehand. And it really drove a lot of people away from the platform. Most of them went over to Instagram, which also had stories, and they never really returned to Snapchat. And that's a big reason why you don't hear about Snapchat a lot anymore these days. Now, in the book, I like to tie design exercises or artifacts directly to these heuristics. And the one that I think really closely aligns with Jacob's law is personas. the frame of reference that user personas help to define is incredibly valuable for teams because it helps us move away from this like self-referential thinking and focus more on the needs and goals of the user, which is actually more useful when prioritizing new features. So user personas help us to kind of get out of the mindset of, as a user, I would do this or I would do that, which we've probably all heard in a design critique, and instead start talking about who the actual audience is and what their needs are, and framing features in the context of those people. So the next one I want to talk about is peak end rule, another one of my favorites, which states that people judge an experience largely based on how they felt at its peak and at its end, rather than the total sum or average of every moment of the experience. So the peak end rule is actually a cognitive bias, which is cognitive biases are systemic errors of thinking, of rationale or judgment that influence our perception of the world and our decision-making ability. You could think of cognitive bias like shortcuts. They're mental shortcuts that increase our efficiency by enabling us to make quick decisions without the need to really thoroughly analyze each and every situation. So scientists actually estimate that approximately 95% of our cognition happens unconsciously, below the threshold of consciousness. And that's because as humans, we're faced with thousands upon thousands of decisions every single day. If we were to thoroughly analyze each and every situation, each and every decision we had to make, we'd be quite frankly crippled by the decisions that we had to make. We'd be paralyzed. So instead, our minds have developed these processes of shortcutting that, analyzing each decision, and instead allows us to kind of unconsciously make decisions to get through, just the sheer magnitude of decisions we have to make every day. Unfortunately, these kind of unconscious systemic, processes, shortcuts that we have, they're sometimes a little faulty. They're not always accurate. And sometimes they can lead to errors. And you see this a lot of times in relation to things like memory. So this was actually discovered by Daniel Kahneman and his associates. And the trial I point out in the book is called When More Pain is Preferred to Less, Adding a Better End. And in this study, Daniel Kahneman basically split participants into two groups. Trial one, which was to stick their hand into cold water for 60 seconds. The second group was to stick their hand into the same temperature water for the same amount of time, but then dunk their hand in slightly warmer water for approximately 30 seconds. What Kahneman found was that it was actually trial two, the group that had their hand in the water the longest, that it actually thought back more favorably upon the experience overall. And this is kind of surprising. It's counterintuitive to what you would think, because after all, it was trial two, the second group, that had their hand in the water the longest. But what Kahneman found out through subsequent studies was that people were really kind of looking at these key parts of the experience, the emotional peaks, whether that's a positive or negative peak, and then the end, instead of looking at all the kind of, adding up all the experience as a whole. They were using these key moments to really define how they felt about it, how likely they were to refer it to someone else, how likely they were to repeat that, whatever that experience was. And so you can already start to kind of see where the implications in it from a design perspective are pretty substantial, because people are going to look at and remember those peaks, whether it's an emotional peak, positive or negative, and then the end to really inform how they felt about the experience overall. Now, if you think about this in the context of the digital space, there's lots of great examples. Some of my favorite I point out in the book, starting with this one. So if you've ever created a newsletter, you know that it can be kind of a stressful experience, because there's no takebacks with email, right? You can't take back spelling errors, or inaccurate information. So you spend a lot of time sweating the details, right? You're going through each and everything and making sure everything looks good before you hit the send button. And, you know, MailChimp knows this. They realize this. They've identified that this is an emotional peak of the experience of creating a newsletter. And so what they do is they introduce a little bit of their brand, right? So here you have a picture of Freddie the chimp, their mascot, and his hand's hovering over a big red button right before you're getting ready to hit the send, to blast your email newsletter out to your audience. And the longer you wait, the more nervous Freddie gets, and you can actually start to see sweat animate down his hand. So this is a really cool, engaging way for MailChimp to start to kind of introduce a bit of their brand humor in a part of the experience that is a key part of the overall experience, right? It's an emotional peak for the users of the service. And then, of course, once you've hit the send button and you've sent out your newsletter, you're at the end of the experience. And MailChimp, they celebrate with you. Freddie gives you a high five. In fact, they even introduced a little bit of an Easter egg here. So when you click Freddie's hand, he'll continue to give you a high five until his hand gets so red that he stops high-fiving. And it's just a little, again, MailChimp bringing in their brand humor, which they're really well known for, into a key part of the experience, the very end, to really kind of, you know, celebrate with you that this experience has come to an end and you've successfully sent out an email newsletter. Another great example of this can be found with apps like Uber Express Pull. And, you know, Uber is one of those teams that just has a top-notch user experience research team that really understands their users. And they were doing research around what's the biggest pain point of using their app. And what they realized that it's actually the wait time, the time between when they've ordered a ride and the time that the ride has actually arrived. And so what they did is started to look at, well, how could we, you know, circumvent that? How can we mitigate the pain point of waiting for the ride? And what they realized is that through a combination of things like providing some kind of, you know, animation to engage people, a little bit of operational transparency so you can see more about your driver, more about the vehicle, and then finally a progression of steps or how far away the driver is to your location. And what they discovered is through these kind of combination of design decisions, they were able to mitigate the wait time pain point of users and dramatically reduce the amount of drop off that they had during this time when people were using their app. And once again, I think it's valuable that we connect the design exercises that relate to each heuristic. In the case of peek in rule, I think it's one of my favorites is journey maps. Make a lot of sense, right? Because they're invaluable for designers to visualize how people use a product or service through the narrative of accomplishing a specific task or goal. This is great because I love journey maps because you can literally see in a linear timeline what people are doing, broken out by phases, and then start to identify, you know, qualitative information from them at those very specific phases or points in the experience, and then start to map on top of that potential opportunities, pain points, metrics. You can start to, you know, map on all these kind of tertiary points of information. But my favorite part is that you can literally see the emotional peaks and valleys of the experience overall. You can visualize where is it that you want, where you need to kind of mitigate some pain points of the experience or capitalize on an emotional peak and use that to kind of, you know, improve the overall user experience. The last heuristic I want to talk about is actually called Hicks Law, which states that the time it takes to make a decision increases with the number and complexity of choices available. Hicks Law is very related to a concept in psychology known as cognitive load, which is very important. It generally refers to the amount of working memory resources. And specifically within interaction design, it refers to the amount of mental resources needed to understand and interact with an interface. I love to kind of describe cognitive load in the terms of a simple graph. The more options or stimuli, or you could think of them almost as UI elements that are available on the screen, the reaction time of the user will go up proportionally. And very much related to that, working memory, which is very similar to, you could think of almost like computer RAM. There's only a finite amount of slots available. And the more slots that are occupied by data, by memory, the slower the process, the system begins to run. And it turns out human beings and our cognitive abilities are very similar to this. We have so many slots available for our working memory. The memory allotted to making quick decisions, and interacting and finding information that we need. And the more things that we have to cognitively keep track of, the longer it takes us to react. Now, if you make a correlation to this in the physical space, one of my favorite examples of this is like the ubiquitous universal TV remotes, which are like mini little cockpits on a piece of plastic. Even people that kind of understand these remotes and know what they're looking for it takes a minute to kind of process all the controls on here to find what they're looking for. Which led to one of my most favorite phenomenons on the internet, grandparents' remotes, right? So these are examples that you can find all over the internet of grandparents that have, recruited their children or grandkids to help them understand the remote. And the solution here is to tape off all the buttons that are completely unnecessary for them as a user to use the TV, right? And this has resulted in some pretty hilarious ad hoc design work where, even the controls are kind of, noted on the actual paper that's taping off all the unnecessary design elements or buttons. And these kind of remotes, they stand in stark contrast to what we're way more familiar with now, these smart TV remotes, which by comparison dramatically reduce the amount of cognitive load by really reducing down the interface of the actual control itself. Another great example of this in the digital space is actually onboarding, right? So onboarding, a lot of apps, when you first launch an application that you just downloaded, it's going to take you through a walkthrough of all the features, and you're expected to remember all those features and how they work, and then they drop you into the application. I don't know if many of you remember when you first opened up Slack for the first time, but what they take is a very different approach called progressively onboarding users. And they do this by first dropping you into Slack and not giving you any features except for being greeted by Slackbot. You're in a safe space here. You can message back with a robot without fear of getting it wrong. And what you're doing in the process of doing this is really learning the key feature of the app, of Slack, which is messaging. And it's only once you've done this that you get exposed to the additional features of the application. It starts to show you where other things are and how to use them. And what they're doing by doing this is really minimizing the cognitive load people have to kind of take on to learn Slack by first introducing them to the core feature of the application, messaging, and only then, once they've understood how that works, exposing them to the additional features that the app provides. Another great example here is the Google homepage, which has remained relatively unchanged, maybe since its entire lifespan. And its advantage is really its simplicity. All it is a search input. And there's zero friction here. All you're doing is entering a keyword. And it's only once you've entered a keyword for whatever it is you're interested in searching the web about that you get exposed to additional controls. So you hit enter, And now you have the ability to filter by images, videos, news, shopping, etc. And only then do you get exposed to different kind of results and things like this. So what Google is doing through this process is really removing the friction of getting you to put in a keyword and avoiding the cognitive load that you would have to take on if this was the interface that you were presented with when you first landed. And it's only once you've entered a keyword that you get exposed with these additional options. And once again, a design exercise that I think is very relevant, and also very kind of relevant to what Vitaly was talking about earlier with navigations, is the exercise of card sorting. So it's great for figuring out how items should be organized according to people's mental models by having participants or organize topics within groups that make the most sense to them. Now, I've obviously, as a designer, taken a swipe at designing a navigation with multiple levels and categories, subcategories, and did it in a way that I thought made the most sense. What card sorting gives us is a tool for understanding how people, the audience that would actually be using the navigation, how they would kind of navigate and find information within it. By sorting in the categories and allowing for them to kind of map out their own mental information architecture, you can then use that to inform your designs instead. And the result is a navigation that's, quite frankly, more human-centered, more intuitive to the actual people using them, as opposed to you, the designer. Now, I mentioned earlier, it's practically impossible to talk about psychology and design and how those interlap without also talking about the ethical responsibility that we carry as designers when it comes to using psychology in design. I think it's really critical that we consider how products and services have the potential to undermine the goals of the people actually using them. In the book, I talk about this little contraption known as the operant conditioning chamber, aka the Skinner box. This was a device used by American psychologist B.F. Skinner to really study how the behavior of animals can be shaped by showing them a stimulus, say, for example, a light that shows in the box, and then training them to behave or respond in a specific way. And this is really the beginnings of behavioral psychology, really. How can behavior be shaped through stimulus responses? I think in the physical space, you see a lot of examples of this. Things like slot machines come to mind. But unfortunately, I think there's just as many examples of this in the digital space. And the first one that I like to point out in the book is the pull down to refresh pattern that was introduced by Twitter, which is, not only very similar to pulling a slot machine lever, but it functionally is providing the same thing that the Skinner box did. It's giving invariable rewards to people. That could be a tweet from someone you follow, a company that you follow. Maybe it's a photo that you were tagged in. It's always different. And this is aligned with what B.F. Skinner actually found, was that he could condition behavior, especially compulsive behavior that happened over and over, by always changing the rewards, right? It's always different. So, it could be, in the case of Twitter, it could be, someone you're following, that's the tweet you see. It's always different. And this has kind of led to a lot of compulsive behavior of continuously kind of pulling down to refresh your feed, that's found its way into other applications as well. Another good example of this, and an example of how technology can actually shape behavior as well, is the autoplay feature that you can find in apps like YouTube or Netflix. And really, what this is doing is kind of removing the need for us to consciously make a decision as humans, right? We can start to kind of passively consume content without having to do anything. And while it's incredibly convenient that I don't have to choose what my next video I'm going to watch will be, there's downsides to this too that I think we should address. We should be cognizant of. You know, I, like many, have probably gotten stuck into a rabbit hole of watching YouTube videos or binge watching on Netflix and losing a lot of time that I wouldn't have otherwise lost if it hadn't been for this autoplay feature. And another example, very ubiquitous example at this point, is the like button that was first introduced by Facebook, which was obviously introduced initially to, you know, introduce a little bit of positivity to the platform, right? You can engage with people's content a little bit. Unfortunately, I think it also has negative consequences that we're starting to realize, and scientists are starting to realize the impact of this is because it plays really directly to the human need for social affirmation. We need to be kind of, you know, affirmed by our peers and our social circle. And we search for fulfillment of this need through features like the like button in Facebook. And we're starting to really see the impact of that on especially susceptible people, you know, humans like teenagers and young, you know, younger people that are on the platform. I think this kind of, you know, it speaks to a broader kind of pattern that we followed in the digital experience industry of moving fast and breaking things, right? We didn't really think about the consequences of a lot of these features. They started off maybe as very innocent features that someone thought of, and next thing you know, they're rolled into the application and millions of people are using them. Unfortunately, I think we didn't really think too thoroughly about the kind of longer impacts of what those features could have. You know, how they could potentially undermine people and the goals that they have, and really affect them in a negative way. And this is very much related to this kind of broader organizational focus over time. I love this graphic by Jesse Weaver, where he's really just highlighting where an organization, and by extension, a design team, where their focus goes over the lifespan of a product, right? It begins by trying to focus on human problems, right? You start off and you're trying to address how people can get to from point A to point B without having their own vehicle, or, you know, how can people stay connected to their broader social network without physically being with them. And then over time, these human problems that are being addressed start to be replaced by business-centered problems. You know, maybe the company gets acquired and they need to make so much in revenue every month or every quarter. And you start to see the focus of a team shift from, you know, human-centered problems to business-centered problems. And this obviously has negative consequences. The way we determine as designers how successful something is through data, right? We look at quantitative data. It tells us how long people are spending on an app, how long they're, you know, engaging with content, how long, you know, how are they progressing through an application in terms of, you know, the information, and what pages are they spending the most time on. But what it doesn't really tell us is why people are behaving a specific way and how the product is impacting their lives, right? It's not telling us those why questions. That data doesn't tell us why someone, you know, spent hours upon hours going through their feed, and how that's negatively impacting their life or their goals. It doesn't tell you, you know, the negative consequences of the social affirmation they're seeking every time they post a photo on their Facebook feed. And I think this is unfortunate because really it's these kind of longer term impacts that we need to be thinking about as designers. If you're interested in this kind of thing, I have a whole nother project devoted to exploring guidance around designing ethically humane products that really focus on user well-being. It's called Humane by Design. And I really, it's it was a really great project to use to kind of explore maybe some alternatives that provide a little bit more friction in experiences and really slow people down and make them a little bit more thoughtful when they're engaging with apps or services. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is how can we apply these principles in our design practice, right? How can designers internalize and apply psychological principles and then articulate them through, the design principles that a team has agreed upon? One of my favorite things about laws of UX in general is, seeing people print out the posters that I make available on the website, posting them up in their offices, and really just putting them front and center in their design space to promote conversation and help each other engage, almost work as visual reminders, right? So this is fantastic because I think that's absolutely one way to operationalize psychology in your design work. And that's to, showcase the artifacts that remind you of those heuristics, right? The idea here was that when you're in a design critique, these are within reach. You can see them. They're reminders of how you can start to articulate your design decisions as a team through the heuristics. The other one I talk about in the book is, I think, maybe even more effective, and that's doing it through actual design principles. So the design principles are great because they really help designers align on what their shared values are as a team. What is it, the things that they value over the things that they don't value as much, right? And it's an agreed upon set of principles that they can align to and remind themselves of each time they have to make a decision. So one of the examples I give in the book is clarity over abundance of choice. Now, this is a very generic principle, but when you think about this, it's a clear line in the sand. As a team, we value clarity even over abundance of choice, which abundance of choice could be seen as an equally valid principle to value, to uphold. But what we're doing with this principle is saying we value clarity over that, right? And then the example I give is reinforcing that with a heuristic, in this case, Hicks' law. So we know that the time it takes to make a decision increases with the number and complexity of choices available. So now you have a principle and it's backed by a psychology heuristic. The last thing you need is actionable rules that help you kind of align with that principle and guide decisions. So the example I use in the book is, in order to achieve this, we must limit choices to no more than 3 items at a time and provide brief explanations when useful that are clear and no more than 80 characters. And now here you have a actionable, clear, and validated design principle that you can really start to use in your team to guide decision making. Now, once again, I talk about all these principles and many more in my book, Laws of UX. It's available all over the place. It's even available now in German and Portuguese, which I'm incredibly excited about. It's in Amazon, Bookshop, Barnes & Noble. And as Avi mentioned earlier, for you, please go check out the book. If you would like to go check it out on the web, you can find it on the O'Reilly Learning platform. Just use Laws UX 20 as your discount code, and you'll have access to the book for 30 days, along with everything else that O'Reilly provides. So, please feel free to go check that out. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, once you've gotten into the book. And I love feedback. So, please hit me up. I'm all over the internet.
Wow. Thank you, John. Wow, this was great. Everyone clap. John, by the way, some people are reporting that that link is not valid, or that Laws of UX 20 is not working. Well, we'll figure it out and we can send an email to everyone after.
Okay.
That would be. So anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we'll address you. Or Oh, hello, everyone. Thanks for sharing. Thank you, John. So question from someone or chat or put it in the chat. Anyone?
I have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Hey.
Hey. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Hey, thanks so much. It was really interesting. One of my questions is, I guess, with psychology, psychology could be applied to one thing in so many different ways. So how many of these principles can you use at a time? And I could imagine it getting very overwhelming to address a bunch of different principles at the same time. So how do you choose which ones to go with? And yeah, if you can elaborate more on that.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So, I mean, I think really it comes down, what I found is there's typically going to be a predominant principle that kind of relates to whatever it is you're doing. If you're looking at a specific feature, it's probably going to be, one heuristic that really is most relevant. And then there's going to be secondary heuristics that generally apply. So it's always kind of multifaceted. There's always multiple, but there's usually one in general. And then when you're talking about like a broader experience, like in everything, like for example, I'll use a website. Instead of talking about a specific feature on the website, you're talking about the website overall. It really comes down to like, there's going to be multiple that apply, right? From a higher level. And that's where I think, that practical application that I spoke about at the end of the talk, and it's the last chapter of the book, really hones in on that one specifically, because I think that more often than not, we are evaluating an experience as a whole and not focusing in on individual features. So it's important to think about these in the context of a broader framework like design principles to really help guide decisions, and then really kind of looking at which are the key heuristics that are most relevant to your specific product or service.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me, John, I have a question.
Sure.
Go ahead.
All right. My question would be more like career-wise or a little more practical. Basically, I wanted to know what are the kind of reactions you get from your colleagues, or let's say from whoever's like the product manager, when you try to bring a new idea, or try to break the mold with the UX laws that you proposed, or with any other idea that you have. Since I know that most companies try to stick to the Silicon Valley methods of operation, and they try to really work the way they have always worked. So like, what are the kinds of reactions do you get, or have you gotten?
That's a great question. And I think that really it comes down to using these heuristics to really kind of try to either shake people out of that kind of, this is the way we've always done things, or validate the kind of thinking that's already there. In fact, when I first kind of got interested in doing the project Laws of UX to begin with, I was working on a team and we had no data available, but we were still having to kind of, justify a lot of design decisions. And honestly, that quickly devolved into well, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we should continue to do it. And there was no really way to oppose that because there's no data that justified doing otherwise, right? But what I actually discovered, and it's what got me interested in the project to begin with, was, well, what if we were able to speak in terms of general psychology? Right. This is the way people generally interact with interfaces and the things that they are susceptible to from a psychology standpoint. And if you can frame up decision-making in that context, it helps to just validate design decisions that much more and really help to kind of boost thinking away from this is the way we've always done it mindset. So it's really, again, I think it's hard to argue with like, the psychology that we're all kind of we all demonstrate, we all kind of, are susceptible to. And if you can frame up designs in terms of that and talk about it in the context of that, I think, you know, it makes the decision making that much more effective.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, Perth raised his hand. Hi, Perth.
Yeah. Hi. This is Parth here from Berlin. Jon, first of all, thanks for the great work. I've been working in the field for almost 15 years now, and earlier as an early evangelist of what goes in our head as designers, it was so much easy when your work came out to help others understand what we are doing in our head in terms of simplifying things. So these are the principles we are trying to juggle with. So great work. My question is for future. There's almost 500 people on the call right now. How we can help you with your next project, Human by Design?
You know, thank you so much for even being interested in doing that. And I think, you know, it's an important one in that it really starts to kind of address the kind of ethical responsibility that we have as designers. You know, in terms of supporting, I would say, you know, the website makes posters available. Print them out, put them up in your space, and have those conversations with your fellow designers. You know, I think that would be that's what the intent behind that was, and really thinking about how you can internalize these more ethically humane principles, just like you know you were describing laws of UX, and that would be fantastic to see. You know, and anyone that's doing that, I would encourage you. Post them up in your space, take pictures of these posters in your space, and tell me how it's kind of impacting your team and guiding your decision making, because you know, that's really what I was the goal that I was after with that website.
Thank you, Bert, and thank you. And David, you're up next.
Great, thank you. Jon, a simple question about your current experience at GM. Do you find in-vehicle design to be more restrictive, and are the journeys much less steep, partially because it's in-vehicle design and you have to be concerned about safety?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Yes and no. I think it's an interesting, auto is in an interesting inflection point, because I think they've started to, you know, auto companies have started to think about their digital like experience within vehicles as more of the vehicle as a digital platform overall. And that's kind of like changed the conversation. Traditionally, automotive UX has been kind of fractured off from the general UX community. And I think you're starting to see with autonomous technology and electrification and all these things happening in connectivity, that the UX problems that exist in the automotive space are really part of a broader platform, digital platform problem. And so it's very interesting. At the same time, the regulation on the automotive industry, I think, keeps people safe, but it is unique. And I actually think that it's the broader UX community that could maybe benefit a little bit from the regulations that exist in the automotive space, right? One of the things I talk about is like, one of the biggest surprises that I had coming to the automotive space coming from web and mobile was that their emphasis on safety of the vehicle occupants through regulations and things like that was significant. And I learned a lot through that. And it made me realize that there is none of that in the consumer electronics space. You know, there's no governing regulation that's going to say, you know, this app that just launched is way too like sticky. People spend way too much time here, or it's way too distracting, or things like that. And I think some of that the consumer electronics space could probably benefit from.
Okay, thank you for that. There is a question from Andy.
Jon, thank you. Great presentation. I'm Andy from Boston, Massachusetts. My question is, back when you were working in web and mobile, were there any like attribution tools you were using to measure the data that really worked well with your design philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, basically all the same kind of qualitative and quantitative, you know, tools that you would expect. I was, you know, already familiar with, and I think that, you know, one of the things that that I was doing a lot of at the time was looking at things like time to task, how long are people spending in the application, looking at those numbers to indicate what success was, right? Like if you're creating an app and you see people spending a lot of time in that app, you equate that to a successful metric, right? And one of the things that I think was absent in that, and I try to emphasize more and more now, is the qualitative part, right? Talking with people and saying, well, what were you doing in that time? And how is it augmenting your capabilities as a human being? How is it getting you closer to your goals, as opposed to, you're just spending more and more time scrolling through a feed or whatever it might be. So it's that emphasis on getting people closer to their goals and not doing any more than that, not looking at numbers just from not looking for success metrics through numbers, but through qualitative feedback from actual people that they're getting value out of the service or app.
Very good. Thank you so much.
That's a great question.
Jon, this is so cool. I love your stuff. It's amazing. And thanks. Thank you. Okay, one more. There's questions.
Sure.
Who else? Okay,
George. Yes, I sent a message to Jon, but also posted it to everyone. If he thinks it merits consideration or an answer, I'd like to hear from him, but I'm not sure, so I would ask to have a look.
What is it?
Do you want me to read it out?
If it's relevant for everyone, sure. If not, we can Jon look at it.
Yeah, I'll let him look. I decide, because other people want to
Okay.
ask questions too. Thank
Anyone
you.
else? Question. Paul has a question here. I see. So Paul asked, do these laws apply differently to mobile versus web?
No, they don't. What's really interesting that I've found, even moving into the automotive UX space from app and web, is that technology changes, right? The interfaces and the conventions even sometimes change on how we interact with this technology. What doesn't change is our underlying kind of blueprint that we share as human beings, how we process information and interpret that, and then use that to inform decisions and interact with interfaces. That's a blueprint that has stayed relatively unchanged for a very long time, and is very unlikely to change anytime soon. So it's these heuristics from psychology are so valuable and timeless because they're building on that. They speak to that underlying blueprint that we share from a cognitive and behavioral standpoint, and inform how we can build really anything to more align with how people actually see the world and process information and make decisions.
Okay, thank you. I definitely agree. I know you have a few more minutes, Jon, with us. You have to go. So maybe one more question. And then, by the way, people stick around, because we're going to do some networking. It's going to be a lot of fun to get to know you from around the world. So one more question. There was a question I saw earlier about other books that you recommend in this field, or more resources.
More resources, absolutely. Like in relation to
your book or to your talk, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you haven't already, I would encourage everyone to visit lawsofux.com. I keep that content up to date with further reading regarding each heuristic, and I'll be adding a bunch of new ones here soon, new heuristics. So, please stay tuned to that. And, obviously in the book, I point out quite a bit as well. And just regarding ethics, I think there's a whole kind of collection of further reading and resources and tools that I track on humanebydesign.com as well. And that one's really interesting in that I think I'm kind of reading George's comment now. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of thinking that's been happening around this topic of ethics and design for quite a long time. And I talk about a lot of that track a lot of that in website, Humane by Design.
Okay, thank you. A question from Karen. Karen Kenzie.
Hi. Yeah, hi. You talked about the cognitive bias of the pig experiment.
Mm-hmm.
What about the negative bias we as humans have to remember the negative as the most, to take the negative as far more important as the positive, even if the positive was so high and we experience a great thing, then we experience something negative in the app or something, and then it's like we tend to have this negative bias.
Yeah, there is a negativity bias that I'm familiar with. And I think, cognitive biases are one of those things that's very much, tangentially related to the heuristics I talk about. That if you're interested in this intersection of psychology and design, cognitive bias is like a whole, like a rabbit hole you can go down. One of my favorite books regarding this is recently came out by David Dylan Thomas called Designing for Cognitive Bias. So if you haven't had a chance, I would encourage everyone to check out that book. But I think it's definitely cognitive biases are very important. I only touch on, from a general aspect, cognitive bias, and I in on peak end rule, which we talked about a little bit earlier. But I think that it's very interesting how people have created the mental shortcuts that we've created to kind of guide our decision making and judgment, how those have a negative implication. And in the digital space, unfortunately, I think you see that a lot in all kinds of aspects. And Karen, I think the example you bring up is a very valid one, where people lock in on a negative aspect that they experienced. I think knowing more about cognitive bias and having an awareness of where we're susceptible from what the downfalls of our cognitive bias are, I think would helps inform our work as a designer in terms of how to avoid that or build upon that in a positive way.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think, John, you have to go, or you can stay a little bit further.
Yeah, I have to go in a few minutes, but I can stick around for maybe one more question.
One more question. There was a question from Thomas.
Hi. I had wondered if you had explored how color theory intermixes with these laws of UX.
Yeah, I touch on, the Gestalt theory, which is very much aligned with what you're kind of describing. And, Gestalt theory, I think, is very interesting. And I definitely include a lot of some of the principles that come from that in the book. But I don't spend too much time on Gestalt theory or color theory in general, because, I'm really trying to look at, from a broader standpoint, user experience overall, and not really just, I think color theory has implications very much to, it leans more toward UI, in my opinion. But, I think it's very interesting, and I've read a lot of really great work around color theory and how that impacts our design kind of processing. So, I lots of thoughts there, but I didn't talk about too much of that in the book.
Okay. All right. I think that I'd like to thank you, John, for this amazing presentation and for your work. Everyone, please unmute yourself and let's hear him clap. Let's hear us clap. The close as we can as to a virtual audience clapping. Yes. Okay. So thank you, John. And now, if you want to stick around, please do, because we're going to do some networking and to get to know each other a little bit. Or if not, see you next time. And hopefully you're following on UX Salon on Instagram, so you can get updates on our future events. Okay, so I want to see how many people are sticking around here, so we'll see what we can do. But I like this idea, which we did last events, is that people stayed around, and sometimes what we will do, we'll split into small groups, And then we can, imagine that you're in a real event, you meet a small group of people and you kind of introduce yourself and maybe kind of share a story or two. So let's see how many people are still here. Okay, it's coming down quickly. Actually, I'm going to also, people who are staying, hold on, I'm going to end the live stream on YouTube. Thank you everyone for watching on YouTube. If you want, jump into Zoom to watch us. So thanks everyone for participating and see you next event. So I'm ending the live stream on YouTube. End. Okay.